For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to StratNewsGlobal. I'm Surya Gangadharan. In May 2014, China's President Xi Jinping was in Shanghai addressing the Conference on Interaction and Confidence Building Measures in Asia. And there's a very significant point he made which is relevant in today's context. He said one cannot live in the 21st century with the outdated thinking from the age of the Cold War and zero-sum games. We believe it is necessary to advocate common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security in Asia. We need to innovate our security concept, establish a new regional security architecture, and jointly build a road for security in Asia that is shared by and win-win for all. So it would appear that 6 years ago, 7 years ago, Xi Jinping was outlining China's plans for dominance in Asia. And if you recall, Foreign Minister Wang Yi was on a tour of Asia since January, visiting various countries in an effort to push that agenda. I have with me Srikanth Kondapalli. You've met him before on our channel. He is the China Studies program in Jawaharlal Nehru University in Delhi. And Srikanth, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
Srikanth, does China really believe its moment in Asia has come and is going to be realized within the next decade?
They feel so, except in structural power terms. Number one, they are the second largest economy in the world with $17 trillion last year. United States is with about $22 trillion. And various estimates pointed out that China will become the largest economy if they are able to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic effectively. But since 2010, when they became the second largest economy, it's already 12 years for them. And they are now the largest trading country. Previously, UK used to be the largest trading country in the 19th century. And 20th century, America became the largest trading country. And they have also become the largest high-tech exporting country. Previously, Germany used to occupy that position. So the sum of all this is that they have been rising economically substantially in this. And they have also been able to be at the center of the supply chain mechanism for the past 10 years. And so, for example, any product that is manufactured today in the world, it comes from China. Take the example of Apple, your iPhone. It is contracted to the Foxconn of Taiwan, and they have set up shops in factories in China. And they produce with the Chinese labor and management and technicians. And it is distributed across the globe. So typically, any product is now produced in China or sourced to China. And so they have become the center of the value chain. And this is very, very important for us to understand because during the pandemic, this was disrupted due to social distancing and other issues. Everything has been shut down. Last 8 weeks, Shanghai has been shut down, and it is estimated that 40% of China's GDP is locked down with this restrictions on the movement of people, etc., in China. So that is the effect of this. So when Xi Jinping spoke about the Asian countries should look after their own security, he was also being very confident that China is at the center of gravity, as Mao Zedong once said in 1949, center of gravity in Asia. And also with this huge investments in the defense sector, they are now the second largest in military spending and also in terms of the naval vessels. So it has a huge impact in terms of the sea lanes of communications and most important, for weaponization of trade, diplomacy, maritime related issues, or many other aspects. So 2014 May is the appetite provided for China in order to realize this goal of China dream, China rejuvenation. And hence we see a lot of the thrust areas that China undertook, be it in Belt and Road Initiative or politically loosely mentioned as Community of Common Destiny. So China is trying to tell many countries, your destiny and my destiny are the
Is linked.
same. Generally, it is only in military alliances that the destinies are the same.
So what you're telling me is China believes it has the economic and military sinews to make its political case for emerging as a predominant guy in Asia. So let's look at their backyard, the South China Sea. Is it firmly in China's grasp?
Absolutely. They control basically 9 reefs, but they militarize the whole of the area with nearly 2,000 acres of built up area in South China Sea with runways in at least 4 of these 5 reefs. Uh, Hongqi 9 surface to air missile batteries to threaten any country that can pass through this region. And in September last year, they introduced the Coast Guard law, whereby any vessel that has to pass through has to open up its dock and they have to seek permission from China passing through the South China Sea. So, what China is trying to say is this is my territory. You're passing through this territory, so you have to seek my blessings in order to pass through this. But unfortunately, there are about $5 trillion of goods and services that pass through. 1 trillion of that belongs to that of the United States. Nearly 50% of Indian trade is passing through the South China Sea. So, in other words, China is demanding that the United States, Japan, Australia, India should kowtow to them in South China Sea.
And you think when it comes to Pakistan, Afghanistan, China's agenda there is again fairly rock solid. Its intentions are clear, and it's able to realize its goals.
With these regions, I think since China's focus is on Asia and they assume that the United States is actually getting weakened with the isolationist policies that Trump administration followed before and reinforced with the Biden administration's policies. We see this in Ukraine, we see this in other parts of the world. So, in this background, the Chinese think that their time has arrived and they intend to now pull the strings in various parts of Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, Central Asia, South Asia, and West Asia. And in many of these regions, the United States had withdrawn. They have withdrawn from the Subic Bay in 1991. They have some agreements with Philippines, which has not been implemented by the Duterte's government. Likewise, their progress with Vietnam is not quite substantial. In other words, in Asian borders, there is any basis except for Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean region. With the removal of American troops from Afghanistan, the continental areas are now left open for contestation and occupation. That is where China is driving a major signaling. In relation to different parts of Asia, they have several ancient strategies which they are now implementing. For example, in Southeast Asia, they have a seeping through quietly in Southeast Asian region, which means then that since the 10 ASEAN countries are weaker compared to China, this is where they are trying to push through a code of conduct which is unilateral in nature and which does not take into consideration the extra regional powers like US, Australia, India, Japan, and other countries where their commerce is passing through. And they have also been proposing the ASEAN plus China. Likewise, this formula has been adopted to ASEAN plus Central Asia, ASEAN plus SAARC countries, South Asian Association
Mhm.
for Regional Cooperation. They have also a similar formula for West Asian region. So, in other words, the Chinese are trying to muzzle their way through in most of these regions, either through lending in the Belt and Road Initiative or creating bases or facilities like Djibouti, like in Solomon Islands or Kiribati, or in
Mhm.
Cambodia, or in Hambantota or other areas. They are trying to push through with these efforts. So there is a new formulation coming up at the marginalization of major powers of the region, like Japan in East Asia, Vietnam in Southeast Asia, India in South Asia, or
Mhm.
countries like US, which used to have a hold in the West Asian region. They are now jettisoning many of those major powers in different parts of the world, but specifically in Asian region.
Mhm. And do you assume that the security relationship between China and Pakistan is as rock solid as it used to be, or is there are the Chinese stepping back a little bit?
The all-weather friendship has been renewed extensively between China and Pakistan, and it is reflected in terms of the nuclear and ballistic missile transfers and newer versions of the missile systems that China is still transferring as we are talking now. They have a live transmission of new technology, high technologies to Pakistan. To that extent, it is still continuing. However, there is a jarring note that is terrorism, as we
Mhm.
saw about a few days ago in Karachi on the Confucius Center in Karachi. Three Chinese were blown up by the Baluchi Liberation Army or by the TPP in Dasu hydroelectricity project a year and a half ago, killing about 11 Chinese in that format.
Mhm.
So there is also a problem in the China-Pakistan related. And if we have to go by the Global Times and its former editor Hu Shichin, then the Chinese would deploy missiles to control these terrorist organizations in Pakistan. Of course, that is not quite possible, as the Americans realized. Even by tomahawks and by drones, they were not able to completely eradicate terrorism in Afghanistan, Pakistan areas. So this is a tall order. Probably they are threatening Pakistan in this format, but it is also clear that they are pushing the counter-terrorism logic. Uh, Irony is that they are banking on the ISI for this, as is
Mhm.
reflected in Afghanistan operations or in the rest of the region.
Mhm. So, what about Iran? There was reports of an agreement between China and Iran, a fairly comprehensive one.
China has a lot of interest in Iran. They initially supplied many nuclear and ballistic missile technologies to Iran. In fact, a former Chinese premier, when he was the premier, Li Peng, visited Isfahan nuclear facility. They have also transferred several systems, technologies for nuclear and ballistic missiles and cruise missiles to Iran. And in relation to the United States agreement with Iran on the nuclear dimension, they're also in the forefront. In fact, it is called the P5 plus 1 format, in which China also participated in the Iranian nuclear related issue in terms of the enriched uranium that Iran is contemplating. ironically with Chinese assistance and with the Russian scientist presence in Iran. Having said that, they also have a tie-up with the United States in what the US congressional reports suggested, one step forward and two steps backward.
Mhm.
Shirley Khan, in her monograph on this subject, suggests to this kind of format, that is, the Chinese would supply first to Iran and then go back, surreptitiously again supply some of these technologies to Iran. But today, overall, they seems to have stopped the export of precision-guided systems to Iran. They see that the vagaries of the U.S. policies during Obama administration, Trump administration, Biden administration on the Iranian nuclear issue also is an opportunity for them to develop relations with Iran as the one of the biggest countries in West Asia. Iran also has a lot of other things like energy production, in which China is interested, but they also succumb, like India, into the American pressure in reduction of the oil from Iran before, although now they are importing from Iran, also in
Mhm.
local currencies. Uh, Secondly, there is a lot of reconstruction that is going on in West Asia, in which the Chinese are interested in this program, not just in Iran, but the rest of West Asia as well. So the labor exports is China is contemplating with 1.8 million workers to be exported to the West Asian region in the construction activities. These are also part of the Belt and Road Initiative projects in which China is actively pushing in that region. So Iran is a major opportunity for China. Number one, to test the American leadership position in the region. Secondly, also as a business opportunity, because the Iranians have been opening up the infrastructure facilities for China. Tehran Metro, for instance, was built by the Chinese companies.
Mhm.
So this indicates the forward momentum of China in West Asia in general and Iran. They also signed a $380 billion agreement before with Iran. Much of that has not yet been realized. Yet, I think there is a prospect of the Iranian reconstruction, West Asian reconstruction, in which Chinese companies, state owned companies, would be taking a big role in this activity. So, China sees this as an opportunity rather than as a challenge.
Now, you mentioned West Asia. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi was in meeting with virtual meeting with the Gulf Arab states, where he spoke about there being no room for a foreign patriarch in the region. Here again, I presume he's making a bid for his own country as a security guarantor of some kind.
Indeed, China imports something like 56% of its oil from West Asia. In some months, they import more from Russia than from West Asia. But that's in the background of the Ukrainian crisis and the recent strategic partnership between Russia and China. Having said that, since the imports from the West Asia, particularly the GCC countries, China is proposing a free trade area with the GCC. And
Mhm.
secondly, they also have the Saudi Arabia as a strategic partner, which is a military ally of the United States. However, during the Ukrainian crisis, the Saudi Arabians did not listen to the Americans on the oil being produced per day. I think something like 4 billion barrels of day or so. Uh, they have now Saudi Arabia, unlike in 1972 uh, when the petrodollar agreement was signed, today there are jarring notes in Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia and China also have a strategic partnership, and Saudi Arabia is heavily investing in the energy sector of China. in the Aramco, and it deals with several Chinese sites for the refineries and so on. Also, there is the Chinese bidding for leadership in the West Asian region. As the Americans are withdrawing, China sold the IRBMs, intermediate range ballistic missiles called silkworms, to Saudi Arabia way back in 1980s. At that
Yeah.
time, it was mainly for hard currency that China was looking for. But today, China's arms exports to UAE, to Saudi Arabia, to various other countries, Kuwait included, they are Iran, as we discussed before. China's arms transfer to West Asia is also increasing substantially. And this is a preliminary measure to caution the American leadership by exporting so many of these weapon systems. Number one. Number two, there is in economy and so on, China is investing in the petrodollars. There is the cautioning of the US dollar, as they say, and the exchanges with the renminbi and local currencies has increased as part of the Belt and Road Initiative projects. Thirdly, there are also a number of Confucius Studies institutes that have come up in West Asia. And China is also actively involved in the maritime sea lanes of communications with the Djibouti naval base, as well as with the Port Said construction activity closer to Suez Canal. They also have these Indian Ocean patrols, Indian Ocean counter piracy Somali operation, naval detachments being sent since 2008. And they have also done a medium air and sea lift capability testing during the evacuation of Chinese from Yemen, Oman, Libya, Syria, and other countries which have witnessed a lot of problems after the Jasmine Revolution or the Tahrir Square incident
Yeah,
in
crisis.
Egypt.
Yeah.
So, in this format, they evacuated 52,000 Chinese at a distance of 8 to 9,000 kilometers away from China.
Yeah.
They lifted through the Indian Ocean contingencies that were sent at that time. They are still continuing with these contingencies. Uh, it is in their 40th or so contingency now in the Indian Ocean. So, this provides a lifeline for China in the maritime domain. It is quite likely that China will also deploy SSBNs and aircraft carriers in the near future in this region.
Mhm.
So, they are
So,
questioning the US leadership in
yeah.
many ways.
Mhm. So, which brings me to my last question. How is India countering this? Do you see India countering this effectively?
Well, at the moment, because of the Galwan and the aftermath, India is more fixated on the continental region because it is since June 15th, 2020, when India lost 20 Indian soldiers. The main effort is mobilization in the land borders. And which means that India has been looking at the maritime dimension only through the Indo-Pacific and the quadrilateral security dialogue mechanisms. But that is not enough because the Malabar exercises with US initially, they now have trilateral exercises with Japan from 2015, and 2019 we now have the Australians also joining, 2020 21, sorry. And so there is the quad formation in the maritime domain is now taking shape. But as we discussed, since 2008, China is active in this region and also active in the Pacific. In 2009, China unveiled a two ocean strategy, Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean strategies. And in fact, today, China has more naval vessels built up than any other country in the world. They have nearly 340 ships uh, projected by 2030, as against just about 200, slightly above 200 for the Americans. Trump administration, they thought that they will raise a 1,000 navy, but cumulatively they don't even have half of those which means China actually is dominating the maritime domain right now, although they have not been able to involve in any skirmish. Following Sun Tzu, they are basically trying the nerves of different countries and gradually expanding their envelope. If you look at the USS Impeccable incident or the 12 destroyers of the Americans, which were pushed away from the South China Sea, we see that
Yeah.
China is actually gobbling up the maritime domain step by step and more in coercive diplomatic fashion rather than in military grab right now. But the larger intent is clear, as the fourth and fifth Foreign Affairs Work Conference of China, addressed by General Secretary Xi Jinping, they have suggested that they have now maritime interest focus, which means then that they want to first protect all these 36,000 state owned enterprises of China working in different parts of the world. Secondly, the Chinese investment, which has crossed more than $1 trillion abroad. And thirdly, the Chinese presence abroad. There are several thousands of Chinese living abroad. So this has
Yeah.
also become a new mission for China. In addition to the tourists, prior to the pandemic, there are 160 million Chinese who went abroad. So after the pandemic, we may possibly see this as one of their missions abroad. So China is preparing for a post-American world order.
And would you say we are somewhere, we are still struggling to figure out the exact dimensions of China's movement, and our efforts in that sense are a little laggard, a little labored?
I think it is also an issue of finances. With
Yeah.
60 to 70 billion dollar budget, it is simply not possible for India to cope up with a China which spends 230 officially, but over
Yeah.
350 billion dollars actually. It is simply not possible for India alone. But what Galwan has indicated is that India can stand up to China, that in various dimensions, India also has a huge advantage in Indian Ocean region as a resident power in the Indian Ocean region, and the preparations regarding the IORA and IONS, Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, and the Indian Ocean diplomacy that Prime Minister Modi had initiated. Uh, India has several advantages that, of course, it has to build up over a period of time, including a blue water navy capability that it has to raise and increase the cost for China if it wants to avoid further costs as we saw in Galwan.
So clearly, a lot of challenges ahead for India and for other littoral countries that are seeking to counter China. Um, um, Long, tough battle ahead. Thank you very much, Srikanth. Great talking to you, and thank you for that perspective.
Thank you.
And for all of those who joined this conversation, thank you for your questions and observations. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on our social media, including Twitter and Instagram. Thank you, and good night.